Orlando Police, this is Bernie License Recorded. How can I help you?
Hi, I just wanted to report that I was in an Uber earlier with a man, and he physically tried to touch me, and I was in the car, and he tried putting his hands on my shirt. He went off the grid,
And what kind of driver was he?
an Uber driver, the rideshare company.
Was just kidnapped by an Uber driver in D.C., held against my will, and involved in a high-speed chase across state lines with police. Crazy.
Uber, you need to be responsible. The driver driving my teenagers was intoxicated.
The driver attempted to drive the wrong way down a one-way street and was also clearly stoned. No missing the smell.
Just because you need a ride doesn't mean you have to be abused or taken advantage of.
People who are riding in these cars should know that they are vulnerable.
I can't see people being allowed to offer commercial trips without having a truly police-vetted background check.
We support innovation in transportation, but we do feel that in order for innovation to be supported, there needs to be clear rules about who's providing the insurance and when.
Ultimately, this is an issue of making sure that passengers are safe.
The whole country, the passengers included and the drivers, are being kept in the dark about what really is going on with Uber and how it's really going to affect them.
Uber is not a tech company. Uber is a transportation company with a fancy tech app.
What they've said is that this is a new industry, therefore they get to be treated special. Well, this is nothing more than a new method of dispatch.
This thing looks like a taxi cab, operates like a taxi cab, charges like a taxi cab, in perhaps less elegant terms, looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, is a duck. And it falls under our rules and regulations for commercial ground transportation carriers.
Under the law, if you accept money to transport somebody, you have a greater duty than a regular driver on the street. Uber says we don't transport anybody. We don't owe a duty, and certainly not the highest duty of care.
They went behind the committee's back, behind the backs of the people in this meeting, and went to other people in local government and state government and asked them to put pressure on us to not amend our code to include the definitions that would define them as a transportation company.
This whole business is just a tragedy waiting to happen, but they want to be exempt because they're special. They're technology, so they shouldn't have to follow the rules.
The debate has been who is liable insurance-wise for the accident, the driver or Uber.
Uber says, we have nothing to do with them. We're just an app. We do not hire these drivers. They're independent contractors. We do not control them. So basically what people don't know is that if you get hurt by one of these cars, Uber's going to go, not me. It's got nothing to do with me.
Your private automobile insurance coverage will say, look, this was a commercial trip. We're not covering it. Lyft, Uber will say, look, the app was not on. We're not covering it.
Standard private passenger auto policy specifically excludes coverage for any kind of injury or damage that arises out of an accident while a driver's holding themselves out for hire. Either drivers aren't aware of that because they haven't read their policy, or they're aware of that and they're just hoping for the best.
Pizza delivery drivers, they have insurance on the pizza card. From the minute it gets turned on to the minute it gets turned off. Everybody else who's driving vehicles on the road, whether they're full or empty, carries commercial insurance 24/7. What they have done is externalized all the cost of their operation. So what they do is they just rake cash. If this were Exxon, people would be up in arms. But it's a cute little phone app, so people are not looking at it in the same way as corporate responsibility.
If you were to ask the average personal auto policyholder if they thought that they should pay a little bit more on their auto insurance to subsidize the activities of a rideshare driver or these companies, most of them would say no. And that's why it's important that people that are going to engage in this activity in these companies have insurance that specifically applies to these activities for the entire time that they're making themselves available for them.
You will have injuries You will have claims on personal policies. You will have denials on those policies. Uber has a pittance of a policy out there in period 1 that says it'll cover $50,000. So who's going to pay? You and me. And I hope to God it's not you and me paying by the loss of a child.
There was a young girl that was killed in an automotive accident concerning an UberX driver. Uber is made a ruling for itself that it's not liable. We should not allow a private corporation to make a legal judgment.
UberX, Lyft are definitely not ride-sharing companies.
The lack of understanding in the legislature made it a prime opportunity for Uber and Lyft to engage in a massive disinformation campaign on a scale that I've never seen before.
They came in with their standard lingo, which was your code is outdated, it's ineffective, it makes no sense. They did not present us with any information concerning their company. They had not read our code. They were not familiar with the laws of the state of Alabama. And we actually took great offense because we just wrote our code completely, rewrote it from scratch in 2011.
UberX and Lyft attempt to be called ride-sharing companies, but it's simply smoke and mirrors to help sell their way into communities by saying there's something different than a taxi cab or a sedan or a limousine so that they can avoid any of the regulations.
Recognizing the extreme risk associated with non-professional drivers driving around on the street looking for rides, Uber set up a shell company. So it basically has put in a layer of protection to secure its $1.7 billion in assets from people who get hurt by UberX.
The only difference between them and a regular taxi cab service is the fact that they use unvetted drivers. They're not police checked. They're using personal automobiles. They're using insurance, which may be 1/5 the cost of commercial liability insurance. And they're operating without really any supervision at all because the only thing that controls them is flipping on and off an app. There's no local management in most cases.
They think that we're trying to regulate them under the taxi format, under the taxi world. That's not necessarily true. However, we can't have a regulatory vacuum either where Uber doesn't have any sort of regulations over itself and we don't ensure at least a minimum code of corporate compliance.
Regulation in the taxi industry especially is very, very important. It's an industry which is a necessity public service. Regulation is necessary so that whether you're rich or poor, whether you live in a dense neighborhood or a very sparse neighborhood, you can have access in a reasonable amount of time to this on-demand service at a guaranteed rate.
When Uber came to the city of Birmingham, they actually pretty much told us they wanted no part of the transportation code. They felt that their drivers are small business. They should be allowed to operate however they want with no regulatory oversight, government oversight whatsoever. That also includes no business license and no paying tax on their income revenue. And we found that to be quite disturbing. Anything that required them to be in compliance with any law in general, they were totally against.
In the past, whenever we have open entry deregulated, service has not improved, service deteriorated, fares went up, and literally we were back regulating within a period of years. I've never seen anything like UberX and Lyft coming into the marketplace and completely ignoring all the rules.
We want Uber drivers and Lyft drivers to get good background checks. We want them to have minimum insurance requirements. We want them to make sure that they go through the process of making sure their cars are safe. We want government to keep an eye on the individuals and make sure that people are safe when they get into the back of a car. Because it's not just me, it's not just you, it's someone's son or someone's daughter.
The mentality of Uber is whatever we do, whoever we hurt, whatever we say, is all legitimized by us becoming profitable, taking over the transportation industry, and our own greed.